Hey guys, tonight we drift into the blistering mornings of ancient Nubia, where the sun is already painting everything gold before you even have a chance to stretch. You trudge out of a low, sun-warmed doorway and immediately feel the desert's authority pressing against your skin. Heat so persistent, it seems to have its own rhythm. You probably won't survive this if you imagine summer as a casual inconvenience. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you listen, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mornings start early because the sun doesn't negotiate, it dominates. Mainstream historians agree that Nubians settled along the Nile and relied heavily on its seasonal rhythms to plan the day. But you're not here for crops alone, you're here for survival. By the time you step outside, the sand radiates heat upward, walls of mud absorb the warmth and slowly exhale it, and even your sandals feel like they've been briefly seared on a hot griddle. Quirky as it seems, some families placed shallow basins of water outside doorways. The evaporation created a tiny, localized breeze, a sort of micro-AC for those patient enough to notice. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious scientific strategy or simply trial and error passed down through generations, whispered from one child to the next. You move cautiously along the streets, the cracked mud of your neighbors' homes soft underfoot despite the desert sun. Everyone's schedule is dictated by heat. Morning labor, fetching water, tending gardens, moving goods, is a dance performed in bursts, paused often to duck into shaded doorways or beneath the low eaves of roofs. The light is almost theatrical, exaggerating the texture of woven reeds and pressed mud. Here's the fringe detail. Some households hung mats soaked in water along windows, a trick you would not think of as cooling if you didn't live here, but it works. Evaporation lowers the indoor temperature significantly, and you can actually feel the air shift if you pass through slowly. Even the clothing speaks volumes. Loose linen robes, sometimes layered in surprising combinations, allow air to flow and sun to reflect. You might scoff at it in modern fashion terms, but function outweighs form here. Historians still argue whether these styles were solely pragmatic or carried social signaling as well, indicating status, family, or tribal affiliation, while still fending off heat stroke. As you move along, you notice patterns in doorways, the way children play in the shadow lines, how elders already sit in cool corners and sip lightly fermented drinks to maintain hydration. Everything aligns with survival, yet feels natural, as though the heat itself choreographs the scene. By mid-morning, the temperature climbs, but you start noticing subtleties. Air drawn through narrow alleys, shadowed courtyards, and overhanging reeds create pockets of comfort. Mainstream historical records confirm that these urban planning choices weren't accidental. They were inherited wisdom, layers upon layers of observation codified in architecture. But then there's the fringe, the stories older than written word. Some elders claim that certain tree placements and shallow depressions in courtyards capture the soul of the wind, a poetic way to describe very real microclimates. Historians still argue whether these were symbolic or literal instructions, but your body doesn't care. It responds to the cool spots wherever they appear. By the time the sun fully dominates the sky, you've learned to map your day around thermal cues, moving from shadow to shade to the slight breeze along the Nile. The desert morning isn't merely hot, it's a teacher, pushing you to think, pause, and adapt. And somewhere in this rhythm, you realize the genius of living without stone foundations, without heavy masonry, without modern technology. The sun becomes your calendar, your clock, your warning system, and your guide. Every motion, every breath is a negotiation with heat, and by paying attention, you survive. You step inside the homes now, and the contrast is immediate. Outside, the sun beats down on sand and mud alike, but here the air is gentler, almost forgiving. Nubian homes, unlike the heavy stone structures you might imagine from other civilizations, rely on mudbrick, reeds, and organic materials, soft, thick walls that act like natural air conditioners. Mainstream historians note that these structures were intentionally designed to trap coolness. Thick walls absorb daytime heat and slowly release it at night, stabilizing interior temperatures. You run your fingers along the rough surface of the mudbrick and notice how it feels almost sponge-like, light, warm in your hand, yet insulating your body from the desert's intensity. The architecture is deceptive in its simplicity. Narrow windows, high ceilings, and slightly inward-sloping walls guide air through the rooms, letting hot air rise and escape while drawing cooler currents in near the floors. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some households strategically positioned water jars and shallow pools inside or just outside these dwellings. Evaporation over the clay floors can drop the ambient temperature by several degrees, a clever trick that feels magical if you've only ever known forced air systems. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate design principle or an accidental byproduct of mud construction, but as you stand inside, the relief is undeniable. The layout of the house itself dictates how people move. Courtyards form the central hub, with rooms opening off to one side, allowing cross-ventilation that modern engineers would not add. You notice that reed mats hang at entrances and over windows, a fringe practice meant to block sunlight while permitting airflow. Children scamper under these shaded arcs, occasionally splashing in small basins, while elders recline near corners where the air is coolest. You can't help but smile at the subtle choreography of life dictated by heat alone, a rhythm older than recorded history. As you trace the walls, you also notice how roofs contribute. Flat, layered roofing made from mats, palm fronds, and packed earth creates a dual effect. It keeps sunlight out and insulates against heat retention. Fringe evidence even suggests that some communities sprinkled light-colored sand on top, reflecting sunlight and reducing absorption, a primitive yet effective solution. Historians still argue whether such techniques were common or reserved for wealthier homes, but your feet tell you the effect is real: cooler surfaces, softer shadows, and a more breathable interior. You move towards the corners of the home, where the family gathers for morning rituals, small meals, or brief rest before work resumes. Airflow channels guide even the lightest breeze to these spots, a subtle gift from architectural intuition. I take a deep breath, tasting the earthy scent of mud, dried reeds, and faint river moisture, and feel how thoughtfully every material and angle has been chosen or discovered over generations to tame the desert heat. The home itself feels alive, responding to temperature, guiding inhabitants, and shaping the pace of daily life. By mid-morning, you realize something remarkable. These dwellings, lacking heavy stone foundations or modern insulation, achieve comfort through observation, adaptation, and careful design. Every nook and corner has a purpose, every mat and jar contributes, and every human movement has been attuned to the subtle dynamics of heat and wind. I step back into the central courtyard briefly, letting the morning sun remind me of its dominance, but with new respect for the clever spaces humans carved out to survive without modern technology.
By late morning, you begin to notice how the Nubians manipulated airflow and shade in ways that would make any modern engineer nod quietly in appreciation. As you wander from courtyard to interior room, the design choices unfold like a map of ancient thermal intelligence. Mainstream historians agree that the combination of open-air courtyards, narrow hallways, and wind corridors allowed air to move freely while keeping direct sun at bay. You follow the path of the breeze and feel the difference immediately. The warm desert air dissipates, replaced by a lighter, cooler draft that snakes through the home as if guided by invisible hands. Here's a quirky detail that seems almost whimsical. Some families planted small palm clusters or acacia trees near entrances or along courtyards, not for fruit or shade alone, but strategically to direct airflow. The trees act as living fans, their leaves rustling to create gentle microcurrents. Historians still argue whether these plantings were intentionally aerodynamic or merely convenient additions that were later understood as practical, but your skin tells you the effect is palpable. You pause beneath one small grove, and the moving air makes the hot stones underfoot feel tolerable for a moment longer. You glance upward at rooftops and notice the subtle layering: woven reeds, mud mats, and clay dusted with light sand. Each layer functions like insulation, reflecting sunlight, absorbing heat, and releasing it slowly. Fringe evidence suggests that water or mud was occasionally spread atop roofs to further cool the home through evaporation. You lean against a cool mud-brick wall and try to imagine the trial and error generations that must have led to this mastery of passive cooling. Every design choice both practical and beautiful in its simplicity. Inside, the interplay of light and shadow shapes human activity. The central courtyard, open to the sky, is shaded only partially by reeds and palm leaves. You see children darting in and out of sunbeams, elders reclining in cooler corners, and workers moving deliberately through shaded paths. You can almost hear the whispered instructions: stay in the shadow, drink slowly, move lightly. These are habits honed over generations, each act a survival tactic. Historians still argue whether these practices were consciously taught or instinctively absorbed, but you can feel their logic woven into every movement. Even the furniture, or lack thereof, plays a role. Low platforms, mats, and simple benches elevate bodies off the heated floor, while maintaining airflow beneath. Clay water jars are strategically placed in corners to provide evaporative cooling for whoever sits nearby. Fringe accounts note that some homes even had shallow trenches lined with reeds that allowed water to flow gently, further cooling interior air. The effect is subtle yet tangible. Movement is guided, body temperature controlled, and work or rest is harmonized with the environment. By the time the morning peaks, you sense the rhythm of survival. Shade, airflow, and carefully chosen plantings orchestrate a comfortable interior despite relentless desert heat. You notice how daily life, the timing of meals, chores, and rest, align with these cooling zones. There's an elegance in the system, an unspoken understanding that the home itself is alive, directing its inhabitants and teaching them how to coexist with the extreme climate. It's not magic, just centuries of observation, adaptation, and human ingenuity made visible in mud, reed, and water. As midday drifts toward afternoon, your attention shifts to the rooftops and upper levels of the Nubian homes. Here, survival strategies become even more inventive. Flat roofs, a hallmark of the region, serve multiple purposes. Some are workspaces, others are storage, and many are passive cooling devices. Mainstream historians note that layered mats, packed earth, and light-colored coatings reflect sunlight while insulating the rooms below, keeping interiors significantly cooler than the desert air above. You run your hand along the rough mats and feel how each layer, though simple, is meticulously chosen to regulate heat. The fringe details are what make these strategies fascinating. In wealthier households, small pools of water or damp reeds were placed atop roofs to encourage evaporative cooling, creating an air conditioning effect long before electricity. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or limited to elite homes, but the principle is elegant. Water, heat, and wind combine to shape the indoor climate subtly yet effectively. You notice children peering from rooftop ledges, likely accustomed to these gentle breezes, their clothing light and flowing to encourage airflow, a perfect visual reminder of form meeting function. Inside the home, ceilings rise higher in main living spaces to allow hot air to escape upward, creating a natural ventilation system. Reed mats hang along the walls and over windows to block direct sunlight without entirely closing off airflow. Fringe accounts suggest that some homes even angled windows and doorways specifically to capture prevailing winds, a subtle orchestration that guides air like a gentle river. Historians still debate whether these designs were the product of formal architectural knowledge or iterative observation passed on orally, but you can sense the careful choreography in every shadow, breeze, and shift of light. Daily life in the Nubian household is shaped by these temperature strategies. Activities occur in rhythm with the coolest parts of each space. Cooking happens in shaded corners, weaving and mending occupy breezy spots, and communal meals take place where the evaporative effects of water jars or courtyard fountains are strongest. You notice elders reclining in mats near these cooling areas, teaching children subtle cues, how to move, when to pause, and where the air feels softest. Mainstream historians confirm that such microclimates were essential to survival, particularly in extreme heat. Quirky yet practical practices continue. Rooftops and courtyards often featured reflective white clay or sand to bounce sunlight away from walls and floors, and certain trees were planted not only for shade but to direct winds into living areas. Historians still argue whether these methods were consciously engineered or instinctively learned, but standing in these spaces you feel the results. The Nubians, without stone or modern technology, had mastered comfort through observation, adaptation, and a profound understanding of their environment. You wander through the courtyard, watch the sunlight shift across the walls, and realize that every detail, from water jars to rooftop coatings, has been optimized for survival, comfort, and continuity.
As evening descends, the rhythm of the Nubian household softens, and you begin to appreciate the quiet genius behind daily life. The scorching heat of the day fades gradually, leaving a pleasant residual warmth that mud brick walls release slowly, keeping the rooms temperate. Mainstream historians highlight that this thermal lag was central to survival. Homes that stayed cooler during the day provided safe, comfortable spaces at night without any mechanical intervention. You trace the contours of a courtyard wall and feel the warmth ebb gently from the clay, a natural reward for careful design and material choice. The quirky details are what bring the environment to life. Small water channels still trickle across courtyards, and evaporative cooling persists even as temperatures drop. Reeds and mats capture and guide lingering breezes into interior rooms. Historians still argue whether these designs were deliberately sophisticated or simply the result of long trial and error, but the effect is undeniable. The home itself continues to regulate the air, directing comfort and guiding movement. You watch a child dip their hands into a shallow basin, creating tiny ripples that catch the fading sunlight, and it feels both practical and poetic. Activities in the household slow in tandem with the temperature. Cooking winds down, weaving or craft work takes place in shaded corners, and families gather near breezier zones for conversation or rest. The architecture subtly dictates this rhythm. High ceilings allow remaining hot air to escape, while cool corners and mats offer natural retreats. Fringe accounts suggest that some homes even planned sleeping areas to align with these cooler spaces, ensuring that nighttime rest was maximized without modern beds or blankets. You feel how humans, materials, and design merge seamlessly to create comfort. As the sun dips fully below the horizon, your awareness of the home's ingenuity grows. Courtyards and rooms now bathe in soft, indirect light, and the faint sound of flowing water or shifting reeds provides a gentle soundtrack. Historians still debate whether Nubian dwellings were consciously designed as climate-responsive architecture or simply evolved this way from necessity. But standing in this space, the answer seems obvious. They worked, and beautifully. You inhale the cool evening air, let your gaze wander along the textured walls, and sense the centuries of adaptation embedded in every brick and reed. Finally, the evening offers reflection. You consider the simple elegance of life dictated by heat and airflow, how movement, rest, and family interaction all revolve around comfort rather than technology. The clever use of water, airflow, plantings, and construction materials has shaped not only physical survival, but social and domestic rhythms. Without stone foundations or modern insulation, the Nubians engineered spaces that were livable, sustainable, and quietly brilliant. You step back, feeling both grounded and awed, understanding that their mastery of everyday life was a form of art, survival, and gentle science all at once. Now let the pace slow with you. The desert light has softened, shadows stretching lazily across courtyards and mud brick walls. The sharp edges of the day round off, and the heat's intensity eases, leaving behind a gentle warmth that wraps the home like a familiar cloak. You notice how the movement of air, once urgent and purposeful, has softened into a quiet rhythm, brushing past mats, reeds, and low walls in slow, deliberate currents. You don't need to act or rush. The architecture itself seems to breathe with you, carrying a kind of permission that never needs to be spoken aloud. You settle into a shaded corner or near a gently flowing basin, feeling the subtle coolness rise from mud brick and water alike. Mainstream historians point out that Nubian houses were designed not only to survive harsh heat, but to offer restorative spaces. And now, after hours of observation and wandering, you can feel exactly what that means. Fringe practices, the placement of trees, water channels, and mats, reveal themselves as quiet orchestration, guiding air and life simultaneously. You close your eyes briefly, let your thoughts drift, and notice the soft humming of evening wind, the rustle of palm leaves, and the faint trickle of water. You realize there is no urgency here, no need to justify pause or comfort. Every element, the mud brick walls, the reed mats, the shaded courtyards, works together to grant respite. You feel the inheritance of human ingenuity, a rhythm of life harmonized with nature, learned, refined, and passed down. Even if the desert will grow hot again tomorrow, tonight the home has tamed it just enough. You are allowed to rest alongside generations of inhabitants who understood that survival is not only physical, but temporal, spatial, and deeply human. As your awareness widens, you let the details fade, the intricate walls, the cooling jars, the patterned shadows. The lessons of patience, adaptation, and gentle observation settle like a soft weight in your mind. The story you've traced through architecture, material, and movement becomes more than history. It becomes a shared, lived experience. You inhale slowly, exhale fully, and feel the quiet inheritance of those who shaped comfort without stone or modern technology.